Pesach's Yevamos Daf Tezvav is completely about the topic of what happens when Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai have a machlokas. We know that the halacha is like Beis Hillel. Question is, did Beis Shammai stick to their own halachic opinion and follow their own opinion in practice, or did they do as Beis Hillel held practically? So the Gemara is going to go through a number of cases to try to prove that Beis Shammai did keep their own opinion. The primary machlokas which we are focused on is that of tzaras erva, that is if two women fall to yibum and one of them is an erva, she is also to do yibum and therefore freed from the mitzvah of yibum and forbidden to marry anybody else until she gets yibum or chalitza. According to Beis Shammai, her tzara is permitted to do yibum and also obligated to do yibum, and it is also to marry anybody else. According to Beis Hillel, that tzara is also to do yibum because it's a mitzvah of eshes ach, it's an isra of eshes ach, and it's permitted to marry anybody else without any chalitza. This is the primary machlokas which we'll focus on a lot, but we're also going to bring in other machlokas and try to show in general whether Beis Shammai kept their own opinion or they followed Beis Hillel's halacha l'maisa. So the Gemara quotes, first of all, we have a brisa which quotes Rabbi Tarfain, who was from the Talmidei Beis Shammai, and he says, Ta'avni, he said, I was always waiting, I was desiring, when will I have an opportunity of tzaras habas, that's our case of tzaras erva, that should come to me, the meaning that such a circumstance could happen and I'll be able to marry her. Meaning he was waiting for that case to happen so that he could fill the halacha of his yeshiva of Beis Shammai, so that he could follow the opinion of Beis Shammai. So we see that Beis Shammai clearly went with their own opinion. And so Gemara says, no, you just have to add one letter here. The word is not, and I will marry her, va'as ena, but va'asi ena, which means I will marry her off to somebody else, meaning he wanted to go like Beis Hillel. He wanted to show that Beis Hillel's approach is correct and marry her off to somebody who was not related to her without yibum, as Beis Hillel would hold as the halacha of a tzaras habas. The Gemara says, if that's what he was trying to say, so what's the point in saying that? Everybody holds like Beis Hillel. The halacha is like Beis Hillel. Why is he so hungry? He's waiting for the opportunity to do like Beis Hillel. That's clear. Now, if he wants to do his own thing, which is like Beis Shammai, which is different than what everybody else is doing, so I understand the hunger. But just to do like Beis Hillel, what's the hunger there? So the Gemara says the hunger is to show that we don't pass like Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, as we've seen on the end of the daf yesterday, which is the top really of this daf. Rav Yochanan ben Nuri held we should take a parav approach and avoid the machlokas Beis Hillel Beis Shammai and require chalitza from every tzaras erva. He's trying to show, we're not going to require chalitza, we're going to go with Beis Hillel fully, and she's allowed to marry anybody in the street even without chalitza. Okay, now the Gemara brings its second proof, and this was an actual incident that happened with Rabban Gamliel and his brother Abba. So Abba was married to Rabban Gamliel's daughter, he died without his children, and now Rabban Gamliel's daughter felt her to yibum along with her tzara. So what happened was that Rabban Gamliel did yibum to the tzara. His daughter, obviously, he couldn't, but the tzara was a tzaras erva, and he went ahead and he did yibum. So you see that practically he kept the halachos of Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel would have said that that's forbidden sin. Isser kares. The Gemara says, what kind of proof is this? First of all, Rabban Gamliel is not from Beis Shammai's Talmidim. So even if you were right, it wouldn't be a good explanation as to why Rabban Gamliel married the tzara, did yibum to the tzara. He's not a Talmud of Beis Shammai. So what then is the reason? So the Gemara is going to offer three approaches. The first approach that the Gemara offers is that Rabban Gamliel's daughter was an islandess, and therefore her tzara was a tzaras islandess, not a tzaras erva, and she's allowed to marry Rabban Gamliel because she's even according to Beis Hillel, she's not really a tzaras erva. Now the Gemara says that couldn't possibly be the reason, because the second opinion in this brisa, quoting this whole story, says that the reason she was allowed to marry and do yibum with Rabban Gamliel is because she was known to be because Rabban Gamliel's daughter was a known islandess. So that's the reason given by the second opinion. It can't be the reason of the first opinion. So there's got to be a different reason. So the says, no, I'm going to save this. It's not a problem. The machlokas between the first opinion and the second opinion was she a known islandess and Abba, Rabban Gamliel's brother, knew he was marrying an islandess? Or was she not known to be an islandess, she was just found to be an islandess once he married her already? The first opinion is saying, not such a big chiddush, it's saying she was not known to be an islandess. When Abba married her, he discovered she was an islandess, and therefore their marriage was annulled. It was cancelled. Therefore, the tzara is not really a tzaras erva at all, because the erva marriage was cancelled, was a mekach tais in the first place. That's why Rabban Gamliel was allowed to do yibum to her, because she was never really married. The second opinion is saying, no, Rabban Gamliel's brother Abba knew that Rabban Gamliel's daughter was an islandess when he married her. Therefore, the marriage is fully legal in force, and the tzara is a real tzaras erva. But since she's a tzaras erva islandess, and the erva therefore is not in the mitzvah of yibum, therefore, even though she's a tzaras erva, she doesn't get the patur of tzaras erva, even according to Beis Hillel, because an islandess is not in the mitzvah of yibum and doesn't pater her tzara. That's all the Gemara's first approach to explain why Rabban Gamliel was allowed to marry his tzaras habas, even according to Beis Hillel. The Gemara's second approach, and for each of these we're going to have to explain what's the difference between the first opinion and the second opinion. So, the Gemara's second approach is that they're arguing on the concept of tzaros, where they were married to the husband at the same time. So the first opinion is holding that they were tzaros, they were married at the same time. That means that Abba, Rabban Gamliel's brother, married Rabban Gamliel's daughter, then he married the tzara, then he divorced Rabban Gamliel's daughter, and then he died. So the tzara was not a tzaras islandess at the time she fell to yibum. She was not a tzaras habas, that is, at the time she fell to yibum, but there had been some time during her marriage career that she was a tzaras habas. The first opinion holds, there, in a case like that, she does not have the patur of tzaras erva, and Rabban Gamliel is allowed to marry her. The second opinion disagrees. The second opinion says the only way that you can consider her to be a tzaras erva, that is, the only way you can get rid of the halacha of a tzaras erva is if the erva was divorced and taken out of the situation before the tzara married in, and they were never married at the same time to Abba, and therefore he holds that this is not a patur. This case where they did overlap, there is no patur, and therefore the second opinion has to give a different reason, and that's that she was an islandess. The erva here, it was an islandess. Gemara's third explanation is that there's a different issue, and that is Rabban Gamliel's daughter was married with a Tanai, and that Tanai was not fulfilled, and therefore there's reason to say that this marriage was totally canceled. It never really existed because the Tanai was not fulfilled, and therefore her tzara is not a tzaras erva at all. So the first opinion holds that's what happened. The Tanai was not fulfilled, and therefore she's not a tzaras erva, and therefore Rabban Gamliel was allowed to marry her. He was allowed to do yibum. The second opinion holds no. Even if somebody is in a marriage and the Tanai, the condition, is not fulfilled, once he's together with her intimately, he overrides the Tanai, because he does not want his Be'iyah to be a Be'iyah Znus, to be out of wedlock, and if he would retroactively say, well, the condition wasn't fulfilled, and therefore we were never married, it would turn out that he did an Isser of Be'iyah Znus out of wedlock intimacy. So therefore, it's got to be that he had in mind that Be'iyah should be a Kedushin, even if the original condition was not fulfilled. In this case, that's what happened, and therefore the second opinion rejects that explanation as to why the tzaras erva, the tzaras habas, was not aser, and has to give a different reason that here Rabban Gamliel's daughter was an islandess. Alright, now the Gemara moves on to its next proof. This is Brother of Masharsha. The Gemara says that, and here we're leaving the case of tzaras habas, tzaras erva. We're going to other cases to show that Beis Shammai did keep their halacha. So the Gemara says that there was an incident that happened with Rabbi Akiva, who picked an esrig, and it was on the first of the month of Shvat. Now, there's a machlokes Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. When does the new year begin as far as Hilchos Meiser is concerned? According to Beis Shammai, it starts on the first of the month of Shvat, in which case Rabbi Akiva's opinion, Rabbi Akiva's esrog, belongs to the coming year. Now, the case was that it was the second year going into the third year, and therefore, according to Beis Shammai, the esrog that he picked is obligated in third year Meiser, which is Meiser Ani, not Meiser Sheni. Now, according to Beis Hillel, though, the new year begins on the 15th of Shvat, and therefore this is from the second year, and it's obligated in Meiser Sheni, not Meiser Ani. So Rabbi Akiva has an esrog here, which is a machlokes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, whether it is obligated in Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani. What did Rabbi Akiva do? So what actually happened was that he kept both. He took off Meiser Ani, he took off Meiser Ani, and he did Meiser Sheni. The Gemara says that clearly shows that he was holding that Beis Shammai did keep their halacha. If Beis Shammai halacha l'maisa went with Beis Hillel, why would he be concerned to take off Meiser Ani as well? Because Beis Shammai didn't even keep their halacha. So the Gemara says no, that's not what actually happened here. What actually happened was that Rabbi Akiva was trying to follow the psak of Beis Hillel. He just was not sure who held what, and therefore he did not know, did Beis Hillel hold that this was a second year esrog, or did he hold it was a third year esrog, and that's why he kept both of those halachas. Okay, the Gemara's next proof was also from an incident that happened, It's concerning the halacha of a child being obligated in sukkah. According to Beis Hillel, a child is only obligated in the mitzvah of sukkah when he's old enough that he does not call out for his mother in the middle of the night. According to Beis Shammai, every child is obligated in the mitzvah of sukkah because of chinuch. Here, the case happened was that the daughter-in-law of Shammai gave birth, and they made a sukkah for the child. They undid the ceiling over his crib and put tzchach so that they could be fulfilling the mitzvah of sukkah as a tiny child in his house. Now, so there you clearly see that Beis Shammai kept their own halacha. Gemara says, no, there that's different, it's not a proof. There they did keep their own halacha, but taking off ceiling panels doesn't prove that you hold that way, and therefore it doesn't create machlokas. It doesn't show different halachas. It doesn't show that we don't have a clear psak. People see that, they think, oh, he just wanted more air in the room. They don't see that, oh, he wants to make a sukkah and keep his own halacha. And that's why in a case like that they were able to do it. So we have established at least that Beis Shammai did keep their own halacha in a situation where it wasn't clear that it was halachic reasons of why what they were doing could have been practical reasons. Okay, the Gemara's next proof is from the halacha of combining mikvahs. The halacha is if you have two separate bodies of water, one is a kosher mikvah and the other one is not a kosher mikvah, possibly because it has too few water, it does not have enough water in it. In order to connect the two so that it's considered to be one large body of water, you need a channel between the two. How wide does that channel have to be? Machlokes Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says it just has to be as wide as a shofaris hanod, that's a tube, and it's got to be two fingers together that can completely rotate within the hole. Now, according to Beis Shammai, though, it has to be the majority of the wall between them has to be taken away. It cannot be majority blocked, it has to be majority open. Now, the Gemara quotes a Baisa that says that there was a stone in Yerushalayim, which was shaped like a trough, and people would do tefillah in there, they would use it as a mikvah. Now, that trough did not contain enough water to be a mikvah, but it was open to another mikvah, which was proper, and Beis Shammai came along and they widened the opening so that it should be majority of the wall. So you see there clearly Beis Shammai was enforcing their own opinion, so obviously they did keep their own halacha and not go like Beis Hillel. The Gemara says no, again, that's not a proof, because that was a situation in which people who would not think there were halachic reasons, they would just think that they were trying to get more water in the trough. Now the trough was called Shokias Yehu, it was filled with dripping water that came off a drain pipe. Okay, so over there, it's not, again, a proof. It's not clear that they're arguing and they're keeping a different halacha. It just seems to be that they are trying to get more water in the thing, so that there should be more practical water to do tefillah in. Okay, the Gemara's next proof is from an incident that happened with Rav Yochanan HaCharani. So by way of introduction, the halacha is that whenever any fruits or vegetables become wet with one of the 7 special liquids, which includes, one of them is oil, the halacha is that it becomes huchsha to be makabel tumah, and that if it touches tummy things from then on, it is tameh, and if an amaretz handles it, you have to assume that it is tameh going forward. Now, that halacha is limited to liquids that are there on purpose, where you are happy from the fact that it's getting wet. So what happens when you have a barrel filled with olives, let's say, and there's liquid that flows out of the olives? So in order to show that you don't want your olives to be wet, you need to make a hole in the barrel and then let that liquid flow out. That would indicate that you don't want the liquid there, and it's okay, it's not considered to be wet, it's not hochsher to be makabel tumah. Now, there's another way to get around that, and that's if the liquid that's flowing out of the olives is not oil. Generally, liquid comes out of olives is oil, but if you have soft olives, the liquid that comes out is a kind of juice. It's not really oil. Now, there's a machlokes Beis Hillel Beis Shammai if that juice counts as oil and is machshir, or if it doesn't count as oil and is not machshir. According to Beis Shammai, it counts. That is, according to Beis Shammai, it does not count as oil, and therefore, if you had a barrel filled with olives, and the olives were leaking this juice, you would not have to make a hole in order to show that you don't want the juice there to prevent it from being huchshar to be makabel tumah, because it won't be huchshar from this liquid anyway, it's not oil. However, according to Beis Hillel, that liquid does count as oil, it is machshar to be makabel tumah, unless you demonstrate that you don't want your olives to get wet with this oil, you want the oil to flow out, and you can do that by making the hole, and you would have to make the hole. So now the story that happened here is as follows. Rav Elazar bar Tzadok said that he was learning with Rav Yochanan HaCharani, and he saw they didn't have much to eat. He was eating dry bread in salt. It was a famine year. He didn't have enough food. So Rav Elazar bar Tzadok went and told his father, and he said, look, he doesn't have anything to eat. So he sent him a barrel of olives. Now he brought him the barrel of olives, and Rav Yochanan HaCharani opened it up and saw that they were wet, and he said, I'm not eating it. So Rav Tzaddik went back to his father and said he doesn't want to eat it because it's wet, and therefore he's afraid that it was Hochshid Bim Makabel Toma and touched by an Amaretz. So Rav Tzaddik said to him, tell him that the barrel has a hole in it. I made the hole, and therefore this liquid does not make you a problem even if you hold that it's oil. The reason that it's wet, even though I made the hole, is that the sediment blocked up the hole, and that's why it got wet. But I really let all the liquid drain out, and therefore there's no problem. The Brisa finishes off, and he says, so you see, the Rav Yochanan HaCharani was keeping the halacha of Beis Hillel. Even though he was one of the Talmidim of Shammai, he kept all the halachos of Beis Hillel. So Gemara says that's why he wanted to make sure that there wasn't any of this liquid, of this juice of the olives, that was on the olives on purpose, which would make it moksha to be makabel tuma. So now the Gemara says, you see, the Brisa is pointing out that Rav Yochanan HaCharani, well, even though he's from the Talmidim of Shammai, kept the halachas of Beis Hillel. Why would the Brisa need to point that out if everybody from Beis Shammai kept the halachas of Beis Hillel? Obviously, this was a rare exception, and most people did not keep the halachas of Beis Hillel. Most Shammai people kept the halachas of Shammai. The Gemara does not respond to that, and the Gemara therefore seems to accept it as a proof. The Gemara does go on to bring another proof. And here we're going back to the sugya of Tzaras Habas. This is possibly not a proof to this question, but just it's trying to resolve the question of how do we paskin in a Tzaras Habas, which would be odd because we know that halacha is always like Beis Hillel. But the Gemara quotes that they asked Rav Yehoshua, what is the halacha of Tzaras Habas? Tzaras Habas, again, of course, is this machlokas Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. It's a tzara of an erva. So the Gemara says, the Brisa says that is Rav Yeshua refused to answer, and he said as follows. He said, why are you sticking my head between two big mountains, between two machlokes, between two arguing opinions, as big as Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? I am afraid to put my head between these two, maybe they'll crush my skull. But this much I'll tell you, I will testify that there are two families in Yerushalayim that have Kohanim Gedolim coming from those families, who served on the Mizbeach, so therefore they were kosher Kohanim, and they were both descended from a Tzaras Habas. Now, Tzaras Habas here, what type of Tzaras Habas marriage? So the Gemara, Rashi explains, we're referring to a Tzaras Habas who married somebody else from the street, not a Tzaras Habas who did Yibam. That is, it's a Tzaras Habas, someone who was a Tzara of an erva, and she went and she married someone else without chalitza. According to Beis Shammai, that's a violation of a lav because she's obligated in Yibam. According to Beis Hillel, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, so he said that they were descended from Tzaras Habas. What's the names of the two families? So he says they are the family of Tzevuim, which is descended from Achmai, and the family of Kupai, that's descended from Koshesh. They're all Tzaras Habas. Now, the Gemara says, let's try to understand this over here. If he had like Beis Hillel, they didn't do anything wrong, there's nothing wrong with these people, what's he afraid of? What's his fear? If Beis Shammai kept Beis Hillel's halacha, so everybody kept Beis Hillel's halacha, why would he be afraid to paskin like Beis Hillel? So obviously then Beis Shammai kept their own halacha, and he's afraid to paskin like one opinion or the other because, well, Beis Hillel is the halacha, so he can't paskin against him, and he's afraid to say that he paskins like Beis Hillel because Beis Shammai kept their own halacha, and they would be upset if it was revealed that someone was a Tzaras Habas and therefore aser, according to them. Now, the Gemara says that, how do you understand Rav Yeshua altogether? What exactly is the problem? So you had these Kohanim Gedolim, and they were descended from Tzaras Habas who married somebody in the street, which according to Beis Shammai is a lav. So what? Lav does not create mamzerim. So these descendants are fine. Even according to Beis Shammai, that there was a lav in the original marriage of the tzara to someone else besides Yibam and without chalitza, the children are fine, so there's no issue. So Gemara says, the Gemara stresses this by saying that Rav Yeshua himself says that you only have mamzerim created from a marriage which was a Beis Din Misa obligation. But here there's no issue at all. So Gemara says, no, it's not that there's no issue at all. There's no kares, and therefore there is no there's no kares, there's no misas beis din, and therefore there is no mamzerim. We're not concerned that the Kohanim are mamzerim. We are concerned, though, that they are psulim. According to Beis Shammai, these descendants would be psulim. Psulim means that they cannot serve as Kohanim. They lose their Kohen status. And the reason for that is because a Tzaras Habas would make the children be psulim to serve as kohanim. How do you know that? We learn as a kal v'chomer from an almana, a widow who marries a kohen gadol. An almana to marry a kohen gadol is a lav, and the halach is that the descendants of an almana who is married to a kohen gadol are psulim to kahuna. Now, the iser of an almana only applies to a kohen gadol. It's a very limited iser. It doesn't apply to most people. Kal v'chomer tzaras habas, which is aser to all people, would make the kids mamzerim. Would make the kids psulim, that is, not mamzerim. And therefore, according to Beis Shammai, these children should be psulim and not be able to serve, yet they did serve, and there would be an issue had there been a problem of tzaras habas, according to Beis Shammai. So now the Gemara asks, I don't understand. The question that he was asked was, what's the halach of the tzaras habas herself? Is she allowed to marry someone in the street, or does she have to do yibum? He didn't answer that. He answered about the kids. He didn't answer the question he was asked. So the Gemara says he was asked both questions and he answered only one of them. He was asked what's the halach of the tzara, and that is, do we hold like Beis Hillel and she's allowed to marry anybody in the street, or do we hold like Beis Shammai and she's not allowed to marry anyone in the street until she does yibum? And if we hold like Beis Shammai, and it's allowed for her to marry anybody, is there an iser on the children or not? Are the children psulim? Do they have a problem? That is, do we say this kal v'chomer from almana, or do we not say the kal v'chomer from almana? Now, why would I not say the kal v'chomer from almana? So Gemara says there is a way to reject the kal v'chomer, and that is that the almana is different than the tzaras habas. The almana, when she marries the kohen gadol, she herself becomes a puzzle. That is, she would not be allowed to marry any kohanim afterwards, even though ordinarily an almana could, if she remained an almana afterwards. That is, her husband, the kohen gadol, didn't divorce her; he died. But she would never be allowed to marry any kohanim afterwards because she had a forbidden relationship with the kohen gadol, which is not allowed. Also, she would not be allowed to eat truma because she had a forbidden relationship with a kohen gadol. Therefore, it makes sense to say that she puzzles her kids. However, tzaras habas is not aser to kahuna. There's no iser to kohanim to marry someone who did a lav, and therefore it would not possibly puzzle her kids, and the kal v'chomer is off. So that was the question that was asked. Those are the two questions that were asked. And he said, I don't know about tzaras habas herself, what the halacha. Well, I know, but I'm not answering you about tzaras habas, I'm afraid. Now, as far as the question of the kids, so then I'll tell you the testimony that I have, that there were at least two situations in which they served as kohanim gedolim. Now, the Gemara just says, why do I care, though? The halacha is like Beis Hillel, so it should be mutter. Anyway, why do I care what Beis Shammai held? Why do I care? According to Beis Shammai, are they actually going to be mutter or not? Beis Shammai is not a halacha. It says, no, it's irrelevant. It's relevant to other isurei lav. Do they create psulim on the kids or not? Tzaras habas is an isur lav according to Beis Shammai, but there are isurei lavim according to Beis Hillel, and that's really the question that we wanted to know. We wanted to learn from this case of Beis Shammai to the case that applies to Beis Hillel. What's an example of a case according to Beis Hillel? So if somebody remarries his wife that he divorced and she married someone else, that's an isur lav. What would be the halach of those kids? Are if there are children that are born from that second marriage, it's really her third marriage, would children born from there, which are being born from a lav marriage, would they be psulim to kahuna or not? And that's what we intend to learn from Beis Shammai and the tzaras habas.